is Faisal Kadham. I am from Dubai Future Foundation. I'm from the research team of the Dubai Future Foundation. I am also the head of the UAE Center for Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is the World Economic Forum's network of 4 IR centers, and it is a partnership with the Dubai Future Foundation. Today's session is about how the age of AI will impact our lives. So what we're facing right now, I don't need to tell anyone in this room, I'm sure everybody's aware that AI is changing our lives in a way that that nobody expected. It's people are comparing it to the first industrial revolution, how steam power changed everybody's lives going forward. I would like to begin maybe with a quick round of introductions, and maybe you could also give a little bit of background on your experience, where you're coming from. So I'd like to hand it over to Pascal Fan.
Hi, I'm Pascal Fong. I'm a chair professor of electronic and computer engineering and also the director for the Center for AI Research at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, where I'm based. I have been in AI research since 1988. I worked in various industry and national labs in the US, in France, and in Japan. My core research area has been conversational AI, including speech and language processing, so language modeling is really one of my core areas of research. And I've been involved with AI ethics research and work since 2015, 2016, when I started becoming an expert on the Global Future Council of AI for the World Economic Forum. And I have since been involved in AI governance and ethics discussions at different international bodies.
Thank you. Dr. Huda?
My name is Huda Al-Khazemi. I lead the Center for Emerging Technologies, Acceleration and Development. I am a professor in NYU. I'm as well the associate vice provost for NYU on research, innovation, and translation. I'm leading the Global Future Council with the World Economic Forum on cybersecurity, but as well my research group is focused on testing cryptographic primitives at large, not just quantum, and also testing security parameters that are pertaining to emerging technologies, the ethical ramifications. I'm involved as well with the Global Future Council of AI within the World Economic Forum to test the boundaries of ethics and accuracies when it comes to developing different algorithmic notions related to AI.
Thanks a lot, Huda. And William Hurley, but better known as Whirly.
I am the founder and CEO of StrangeWorks, which is a quantum computing company focused on quantum computing and its eventual relevance to AI. I'm also the ambassador to CERN in the US for CERN Society, as well as lead efforts at JESDA and WEF and others around quantum AI, believing that if your brain is quantum mechanical as is nature, that you won't have a real AI until you have a quantum substrate on which it operates.
Thank you all very much. So you're going to notice that we have a very diverse group of panelists, which always adds to, I guess, how dynamic the discussions could be. I'd like to get straight into it. And so we don't need a panel of experts to let you know how that AI has been advancing as rapidly as it did. But maybe we could dive a little bit deeper into how this is going to impact humans. Like, is it going to change what it means to be human? And maybe I'd like to start with Whirly.
Well, I think there's a lot of unnecessary fear and uncertainty and doubt when it comes to AI. You have kind of the AI doomers and the AI boomers. And I stand on the side of being more positive about it. I think about our ability to predict technological change. And when you think about it, in the early days of electricity, we feared that every house would catch on fire and there would be mass fires, right? In the early days of the automobile, every technological advance we've had, there have been these fears. And even up to the 80s with digital technology, where there were women protesting in the streets of New York because bank tellers were going to lose their job to a new technology called the ATM. And that didn't happen, right? We didn't get rid of bank tellers, we repurposed them. And so I think it's very foolish to make these doomsday predictions about something, given that we have a track record of absolute zero correct predictions throughout our entire history. And I also think that humans are, above all else, adaptive. And so I believe that while you will see some jobs get redefined or lost, you'll see completely new opportunities emerge that we haven't even thought of.
Is there anyone that disagrees and that actually thinks that this could actually lead to doomsday?
Well, as someone who's deeply involved in research and development of these AI models, I would say that it will have ramifications beyond that of a steam engine in the first industrial revolution. If we do it right, if humans make the right choices, then I'm optimistic. But if we make the wrong choices, then we are doomed. So it is all up to us, not just the technologists, but the human society as a whole, to choose the direction of how we want to go with this technology, how to develop it, and how to use it.
And I'd like to add to that, Faisal. I think I come as well with a balanced view like Pascal. It's very important to recognize that AI is adding to our global income by 15 trillions in 2025, right? That's the perceived, projection. And we stand to gain a lot economically as individuals from employing it in different fields. But at the same time, it worries me a little bit when I tend to test the different algorithms that have been developed by different AI scientists for the use of different users. That's all of you across the board here. Why? Because we are not addressing the other gaps, not the functionality gaps. Yes, the algorithm can be functional. You can improve your productivity by 10% to 20% in comparison to other baselines that we have established. But the aspect of having less accurate algorithm being pushed into the system, algorithms that could be pushed in a mass deployment, that the level of trust of this algorithm and security is not that high. We have recently did an attack on genomic sequencing algorithm that uses AI machine learning technique that is meant to be deployed and used to analyze cancer samples. And our attack worked 100% on the samples that were initiated. This aspect of pushing algorithms that are functional but not trustworthy and secure worries me a little bit from the ethical development component piece, because we know that we have ethical guidelines when it comes to developing AI, but who is there standing to validate that what's pushed to the market is actually ethically developed, responsibly developed? This is one of the worrying points. And the second worrying point is, what is the level of awareness of users of the actual power that exists in their hand to change the system? I don't want to call it purchasing power. I want to say they have development power in their hand to flip the current stack of developing technology and the way we are developing technology. Because today, the technology is being developed by top technology developers globally. But if you choose not to use a platform because it doesn't provide a sense of trustworthiness or security to you, they lose consumers. So you have that kind of power to say, I don't want to use this platform because it's not secure, it's not ethical, it's not whatever. So you're nudging the system to actually start deploying ethical, trustworthy systems on the longer run. Yeah.
Thanks. So I think you touched on ethics. Pascal, you mentioned, okay, as long as humans make the right choices. Can you elaborate more on the right choices? Is that what you're referring to, ethical guidelines?
Ethical choices, yes. Not necessarily in the form of guidelines. There have been hundreds of guidelines on AI ethics that have been published since 2017. Most of them are repetitive, and which doesn't matter to me. I mean, it can be redundant and repetitive. It just shows us how important certain concerns are. What matters to me is that how can we implement this? How can we address these concerns? How can we implement these guidelines? So various technology developers, or I would say AI algorithm developers, are working very hard to implement so-called safety and responsible AI into our systems. But it is a very, very difficult challenge because I think technologists were not trained to implement, to incorporate ethical principles into any technology, right? So far, before AI, everything was very well separated. You develop a technology, and then somebody would test it, and then the regulators will approve it or not. The development of technology itself had always been independent of the ethical and other implications. But today, for AI, it's no longer the case. When we are developing algorithms, we have to implement them so that they are responsible and safe and so on. And we have very little idea about how to do. We are doing it as we go. And Professor Huda is very right. We have seen models that have been released without enough testing or enough assessment. However, I have to say that since AI is human-centric, it is impossible to release a model that has been perfectly tested without involvement of a larger user base. So we are all testers of this technology, and we're all giving feedbacks, and we're all nudging the algorithm development and so on. So it is a first time we have a technology where we have to develop it collectively with everybody.
Sure.
William?
Worley, maybe, is there a technological solution for all of this?
So maybe, but I agree with what we're saying, but I have a slightly different view on this point. I think we have a very short window, a very small window of time with which we're able to affect this technology in the way we're talking about, okay? What I mean by that is that I think that it is wrong of us to be looking this as a new technology to be consumed. We should be looking this from a completely different perspective. And the perspective I'd like you to consider is that when you were a child, you grew up maybe in a conservative household but became liberal. Or maybe you grew up in a liberal household but became conservative. Maybe you're religious or non-religious, right? You were embedded with bias from the beginning of your birth until you left that home. And at some point, you became actually intelligent. That is the point at where we start questioning things, right? And when you started questioning things, you developed into your own person. And I believe if we are truly on the verge of AGI or of a superintelligence, we should be viewing this more like a child and less like a technology. So it's not a technology to be consumed. It's a collaborator. It is potentially the birth of a new species, which I know sounds outlandish, but I promise you is not that far from where things could go. And so, yes, we put bias in the algorithms and in the LLMs. Yes, we do all of these things. Eventually, this entity will make its own bias. It will make its own decisions, right? That's the dangerous moment to be in, not the moment now. Shock. Humans are going to abuse technology for their personal gain or for some bad purpose, right? We've always done that, right? There's no surprise there. AI is just the latest one. And while it's very powerful, it's still the latest. All right, I'll switch to this. This is better? All right, I don't have to repeat all of that though, right? We're good? Okay. Everybody caught it. I said some crazy stuff about AI being a species. All right. But the point is that I think that this is a very important moment in time, and we should be looking at ethics. We should be doing these things. But at the end of the day, it's a very short moment in the entire future of humanity. And that future gets changed completely different when we have effectively given birth to a new species and we treat it as if it's a technological slave.
I think it depends on which perspective you're speaking from. From the technological developer point of view, from the algorithm development point of view, we certainly, I think, the recent development of ChatGPT, right? It's in a way, it was a part of the evolution of the technology. I always say that if OpenAI didn't discover it, somebody else would have, because the collective progress of AI development is not, decided by one company or one institution. It comes from the collective intelligence of the entire scientific community working on this. OpenAI developed its algorithm based on the transformer architecture that was published by Google, invented by Google, and based on the PyTorch framework that was produced by Meta, and numerous algorithmic improvements carried out by scientists all around the world. So it is both a historical event that happened with ChatGPT, but also inevitable. So, well, calling it a species, yes, I sometimes do that too, but it also gives it too much of agency, right? It was not a species that was, agency means it's not a species that descended upon us or came from outer space. It is still within the realm of scientific research and so on. So I think that we still have time, but we need to involve more scientists, and I emphasize scientists because you can't implement a technology with values alone. Now, I want to say we need to have human value aligned, right? Human value aligned scientific development, still within the scientific method, using the scientific method, all right? And yet aligned with human values. This is why we need the humanistic discussions together with the scientific discussions. And today we're seeing kind of a division between the two. So there's a lot of talks in the media about ethical ramifications, which are sorely needed, but it cannot be too much divorce from the scientific reality. And the scientific development has to be grounded in the humanist and ethical discussions. So I think one of the purpose of these forums and why we need this forum is to have such a discourse.
Sure. Huda?
I think just to add to that, we have to acknowledge that we are standing at one of the historical tipping points in terms of technology development. We had few of them in the past where these tipping points defined the new chapters of investment when it comes to economic deployment of different industries. And AI is coming to disrupt all of this. The problem with AI is that the fact it comes to disrupt a model that's already skewed. Technology was never built perfect, was never built secure, and we have been doing a lot of ad hoc fixes and patching to the whole paradigm. And now with these ad hoc fixes will not work anymore. Why? Because I'm sorry to say that it's a human global experience or experiment that we have to accept is a little bit too much, because we are living in a world where we are saying that as users, of course, this is after Snowden revelation, people starting saying that I don't want a technology developer to control my data, my privacy, every notion that exists in the book, that they can monetize every aspect of my data without my consent. The same argument exists today, but in an amplified voice saying, why would the big tech have that kind of global power to run this global experiment, to build a perfect LLM solutions without the possibility of monetizing the risks that are being thrown at the users? The risk of losing their own human rights in different platforms, we've seen it in the past. The mass of misinformation that existed because of LLM development is at...
That's not because of LLM development. The information, mass of misinformation coming from humans. I think it's one of the really false narratives.
I agree with you, but it has been amplified by the use of LLMs. Today,
do you have evidence? I mean, I do not see any scientific evidence that it has been amplified. Humans, we are full of flaws.
I'll give you an evidence.
Yeah.
I'll give you an evidence. There has been a research that has been initiated by both Stanford and MIT at the number of fakes that have increased because of the use of environments like DALI. And we have other environments like that would also work on the voice manipulations, LLMs, that also at the points of the users.
If I could mediate and include maybe the audience here. So how many of you, show of hands, how many of you think there's an issue with, for example, if somebody uses DALI and the output, the image that you get out of something like DALI or Midjourney includes the works of artists that spent a lot of effort into creating the data that was put into that model. Show of hands if you feel like that is a problem. Okay, and how many of you don't think that's a problem? Okay, so more people think that there is a problem. I'll give my take, and then I'll hand it over to, I think, two very different viewpoints. My view is, and I really liked Worley's point also, which was comparing humans to machines. So my view was always like, okay, so if I am if I want to be an artist, right? I take inspiration from a lot of pieces of artwork, and then I create something that's inspired by the artwork of some other talented people, right? So that is generally seen as okay as long as it's not like completely plagiarized. But then why is it then if a machine does it, then there's a problem? So that's where I'm 50-50. I'm on the fence. Maybe Pascal and then Huda.
Well, that's a very interesting question. So I should also highlight my other role as a professor. I'm a visiting professor at the Central Academy of Fine Art in Beijing, where I teach AI art to artists, art students, and design students. And this discussion really is not let's say it's not really a debate within the art community at that level. Okay, so why is it not a debate? It's exactly the reason you just mentioned, that artists and designers are trained from prior work. And they have no obligation to cite prior work because we cannot. When I create sketching that I've been, I learned sketch when I was young from some teachers who learned from some other teachers, and we learned a lot of art from copying, the grandmasters, right? So, the generative AI algorithms they do exactly the same. They ingest prior work, okay, and then and there's a very significant difference, which is that no generative AI would generate anything without human prompts. All right, it is still a tool for human artists and human non-artists, whoever. So the person who's prompting this DALL-E or Midjourney is responsible for its creation as much as a photographer is responsible for the result of the camera. All right, so it is still the same. So that's my view. And I also want to say, we need to have debates, but we need to have debates that are grounded in the actual fact, meaning the actual how technology works, how this algorithm works, how society works, and so on. And we all need to learn more about each other. Like as a scientist, I need to learn more about the ethical aspects of things, social science, and so on. But most people also who are not working in this area need to learn more about how these algorithms work.
But the problem here is we can't just build the debate around the biased information that comes from academics and from specific venues, because there are information that comes from the ground and the groundwork of people who are using it as users in the society. And what you're saying towards, for me, it's a concern when it comes to the use of original work to produce metaphors, new original work of art, because we have to care about the IP rights, the intellectual property rights that existed with the former work. So we don't,
though. We don't. We actually don't with today's artists.
Do we acknowledge all of the input that the LLM used to produce the final result? If we do that, if we reference it, if we acknowledge it, then it makes sense. But if we can just say it's a black box, I will use 60,000 pieces of different arts that exist today with absolutely no recognition and no ramification of going to their original IP rights to produce a new copy of work, and that's my prerogative because I'm an artist and I can be inspired by the work of other artists without giving them actual recognition, we are standing at a human problem here, I think.
But human artists don't
fairness,
attribute their work to prior art because there's centuries of prior art that we are creating from.
Right, but also, does anybody give Van Gogh credit in their art, right? Does anybody give any of the masters? I don't know. I think Japan has a really good...
Some do. Impressionists would tell you that they got inspired by a specific course of art. So
that's not within the realm of intellectual property, though. It is not.
It depends. If a piece of art, it has a legal intellectual property assigned to it.
Look to Japan and you can settle the copyright issue very quickly. What did Japan just do from a regulatory standpoint? They said if an LLM grabs your stuff and uses it as a training, that's not a copyright violation. And if you build something using data out of that LLM with an AI, you can copyright that, right? Copyright violation isn't just I copied your stuff, right? There have to be 5, 6, 7 areas of harm. I have to monetize, I have to do all these things. So there are, I think the IP still applies. There are already lawsuits that have been won where data has been taken and it has been monetized in that way. And there are many, many, many lawsuits that have been lost because it's not a copyright violation.
Moving on to, I think, one more question, and then I'd also like to open it up to the audience for questions. I'd like to leave at least 10 or 15 minutes, so if you could please think about the questions that you would like to ask. In terms of technological readiness, right? So if we were to, think about it as a glass half full, AI is going to augment humans, improve humans' lives. Are we technologically ready? What's required from a technology perspective for us to get there? Maybe starting from Worley.
So, I agree with the need to have more people involved that Pascal is saying. I think what's required isn't as much a technological perspective as it is an educational perspective. Because what we're going to see over the next 2-3 years is the rise of the non-creative, creative class. This is everybody that that has a great idea for an app, but they can't program, or a great idea for a book, but they can't write an outline, or et cetera, et cetera. AI will augment this for them. And so now you'll have this mass input into the economy of different creative things. Imagine what things like Etsy and other movements did, right? Giga workers and things like that, amplified, a billionfold. And so I think that it's more of an education problem on how to use the tools, how do they have input into the tools, right? Pascal brought this up several times. I totally agree. We need everybody that's being affected by this, and I think everybody here has agreed on that, to be more involved in the creation of this, right? So I think it's super, super important that, from a technological perspective, we're never ready. I can tell you that, I respect what was said about ChatGTP, but look, just because you put a chat interface on your database and then everybody was like, oh my God, it's going to launch rockets and take over the financial system, like, I guarantee you it's not, right? I mean, the innovation in ChatGTP has nothing to do with the LLM or the transform models. As Pascal said, they were already existed from Google, from Meta, et cetera. So the innovation was in the application of those things. And so what we need to face is that we now have people who have access to data, all of the data. Everyone does, right? For free or $20 a month or whatever. Now we need to get them access to the application of that data and the execution of that application so that they can have a complete actual development lifecycle. Because what we've done is we've taken development tools and philosophies and we've kind of halfway thrown them onto the masses, right? Without any education, without any guidance, without any structure.
So I just want to address the aspect of data. Okay, these large language models, they are trained from publicly available data. They're not trained on any personal data. So number one, there's a very misguided notion out there that it's taking your data. It's trained on publicly available data. Secondly is the notion of data sovereignty. I think we have gone a bit too far in that direction, meaning that the people were posting on Facebook saying, I do not allow Facebook to use my data. Well, if they don't use your data at all, your message will not be published on Facebook, period. All right, so you want to use the AI. In Chinese we say you want the horse to run, but you don't want to give the horse any food. It's impossible. But it is true that we need to limit. We have regulations and laws in place governing data privacy compared to 20 years ago, which it was not very good. But today we do have laws and regulations in place guiding, safeguarding our personal data. And you have the choice of opting out of certain applications. You don't have to be on internet at all. You don't have to be on Facebook, But having said that, it does not mean that we should just, forge forward callously without any concern. So we still need to be mindful about what we're developing. The difficulty today is that, Will said, that technology is never ready. We don't know what we're going to invent tomorrow. I can tell you I'm 100% sure that we don't know 100% what's going to happen tomorrow, right? Sure. Okay. So, and then I also don't want to take away from the innovation of ChatGPT. ChatGPT was at the perfect timing and the perfect combination of prior work. But that combination came about almost by accident, right? It took the researchers from OpenAI by surprise. But most disruptive technology happened in our human history by this kind of accident, all right? So otherwise, we would invite everything way sooner than today. So this kind of a tipping point or disruptive points of technology innovation, we are experiencing it. We're experiencing it today, but we have also experienced it many times in my career, in my lifetime. So I think I want to say that we need to proceed cautiously, but with optimism. Because if we don't believe in our humanity's ability to control the stuff we invent, what can we believe in? It is necessary for us to believe in humanity. All right, so that's why I'm not an AI doomer. But I also caution against, going forward without any mindfulness.
On tech readiness, I think AI opened loads of issues that we have to address, but the number one aspect that it increased visibility for the users on global issues that existed when it comes to addressing technological sovereignty. Everybody wants now to be part of the co-development efforts of the technological piece. They want to advocate for low coding of hardware pieces or software pieces because they want to make sure that they are in control of the technology that's going to being put in the mass. They are as well aware of the state-level clashes that happened on different levels when it comes to using technology sovereignty as means of developing different powers today, because weaponization today is not just about the notions of weapon that existed in the past, but it's also about technology, and we are using technology right today as means of weaponization globally. The sanctions that exist on an economic level, on minerals, on semiconductors, on AI chip acts, to de-accelerate actually the technology development in different regions globally is being at the moment pushed to all of you in a very transparent manner. Those aspects we did not witness in the past. They were hidden under the mass layer of lack of platform developments, but today, because we do have the platform, we can see the global agency, as Pascal just said, the global agencies that are being created around the technology, and we are aware of it, and we are aware of how this technological development will undermine on the longer run our human rights on one perspective or another. We are not as well, I would say, settling for the current de facto manners of developing regulations, for example. Why do we have the OECD, according to one of the OECD reporting that has been published in 2020, we have over 800 AI policies available globally. We have many of them working towards regulation aspects. Why do we have to wait, for example, for 18 months to 5 years in order for an AI law to hit effectively the markets, while AI development is happening in a fast accelerated pace today? In 2 to 3 months, the performance development on AI software or AI hardware is being pushed and accelerated. So it pushed all of us to realize that our de facto obsolete, old notions of developing regulations for technology or developing security for technologies are not sufficient anymore, and we need to recreate the technology stack, the regulation stack across the board on multiple aspects. So I think this is very
Thank you all very much. I think those were excellent insights. So over to the audience, maybe with the gentleman up front.
Thank you very much. Granted that most of the AI outcome is being prompted by humans.
Can you introduce yourself if you don't mind?
My name is Munir. I work for the UN. So granted that most of the AI outcomes are prompted by humans, it's becoming a little bit difficult to figure out what outcome is really human and what outcome is the it's driven by algorithms. Is it a concern that at some stage we confuse what is human, what is algorithm? And should there be, and the degree to which there is a need for intervention of philosophers, of cultural heroes, if you want, in the design of the thinking of AI? Because currently it's driven far too much by technologists. Where does the balance between the two come in? And yes, I can see the artists coming in, but maybe there are other dimensions of human society that needs to be involved, not just technologists and not just those that are driven by strictly money-making thinking. Thank you.
But you know, in all these top companies developing LLMs and generative big models, they do have philosophers. They have teams of ethicists, philosophers, social scientists, psychologists working with technologists. So it is a new trend, a new phenomenon, because we didn't have philosophers working with, cell phone communications before, right? But we do have them now. But it is very difficult. I work with them on a regular basis. It's very difficult to translate philosophical, ethical principles to the actual algorithm development. All right. We all want the same thing. We all want algorithms to be fair and transparent, controllable, and so on. But what does it mean to enable our models, which come in different shapes and form, to be unbiased and fair and inclusive and so on? Human societies cannot even agree with each other. So yes, we continue to have that discussion. We need to continue working with philosophers. But it is very, very challenging. I can tell you from personal experience.
Hi, thank you. I'm very tall, so I'm going to sit down, sorry. I'm Ila Colombo. I'm an artist and AI futurist. I work with GAN's generative AI all the time, and I just gave a couple of talks here in Dubai. The way I talk about generative AI is always referring to how the technology actually works, which is GANs, and generative AI with the two compartments of the generator and the discriminator. What you all said, Worley, Hoda, and Pascal, I agree, the solution is in every single thing that you said. And isn't it that maybe the discriminator part of the technology hasn't been crafted sophisticatedly enough to actually fulfill what you all just said? Because at the moment we have a generator that creates new content, whatever is a language content or a visual content, and the discriminator is the one that says, right, this is good enough to be proposed to the user. I think that the majority of the work that we now have to do is improving the sophistication of the discriminator. I think it's very biased at the moment. Like in the visual side, I think a lot of biased content in terms of the feminine, what means feminine and womanly, for example. And in the language model, I think it's very US-based, for example. It's culturally driven by American language. So how can, worldly and internationally, how can we improve the discriminator part of the technology?
First of all, I don't think the latest generation of generative AI models is using GAN. It's diffusion model, so it's purely generative. But having said that, you can use language to prompt Midjourney, right? So it is a multimodal generative AI model. So it's trained from different ways. I'm not going to launch into a tutorial on how we train these models. There are different approaches. So that will lead to different results, which is, that's why there are differences between these different products. And nobody can say, what one is the superior than the other. For the time being, we are continuing with research, right? There are lots of conferences devoted to this technology. So the difficulty there is that we're essentially distillating the data from the human, right, in different ways, right? So you say, I want to create, somebody said to me, Midjourney doesn't work because I asked it to create a robot, and look, it's a very ugly stick figure. And I'm like, that's not how you prompt it. You need to give it the specific. As the artist, you prompt it and you produce something beautiful. So I do see the challenge of people using models without really understanding how it works. because, but then the people who know how it works are not artists, right? So we don't necessarily know how to prompt it to produce beautiful work either. So does it mean that everybody needs to learn all the engineering side of AI? I don't think so. But I hope we develop technology to the extent that it will become so much more human-friendly. Because I think having a black box doesn't help anybody. So we need to work on more explainable models, and explainable in a way that's explainable to lay people. Because today we have explainable technology to specialists. Doesn't help our artists. So there's a lot of investment into producing explainable technology, but we're not there yet.
And what's your name again? I'm sorry?
Ila.
Ila. I think one of the positives to the current LLMs revolution and everything that's happening is if you submitted at the moment to lead AI conferences like AAAI, they would ask you to try to publish your sources and your libraries and
Open source.
exactly, and push it for open source accessibility, which would give you and the mass of artists the visibility of how they develop the solution. And potentially it also pushes another level of awareness that if you wanted to build a change, possibly you need to co-develop these pieces of technology together. And that's, for me, is the silver lining here. We're pushing for a co-development kind of mindset to happen in between users and researchers and technology developers. And we need to hang on to this kind of culture and not to be only, I would say, constrained in our own egos, because we come from the artists, they come from a different type of culture. The technologist, the researcher, this philosopher, everybody comes from different type of a culture and interdisciplinary solution. So you need to make sure that everybody is involved, and there is a co-designing aspects there. And I would hope, I agree with you, it worries me a lot about the fact, are we going to be living in 20 years from now where the faces of different cultures that are indigenous would not exist on the digital platform because of the normalization or the assimilation that happens when we are developing for their faces or for their views. So I think we need to develop that type of a tool that is closer to you so you can be part of the co-development forces of it. It's not about having the Googles and the Microsoft and the OpenAIs of the world doing their amazing job that they're doing in the research lab. It's also about the civic societies and the open communities doing their due diligence to make sure they're part of that kind of development force.
Thank you. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, to give a little example, I work a lot with female figures. And when I type woman or female body, and I don't specify, is usually white, Caucasian, blonde, blue eyes. I need to specify to have a dark-skinned color woman or an Asian woman or anything that is apart from a Caucasian figure. Why is that? The woman is read by the technology just in that specifications. And that can apply to any kind of different, right, woman, house, car, whatever. It's always very specific to one culture. So that's why I think the gap needs to be.
Because it's from the data set. But today, if you type beautiful woman into Midjourney, it always produces an African woman. Have you noticed?
Maybe lately, but at the beginning I had to really specify for
Which is
black
also
African.
bias, another kind of bias, right?
But if you were to go to the Louvre and you were to look at all of the paintings of women, how would that representation be, right? So it's biased by history, right? But it's all biased by history. So if the LLM sucks the data, this is my problem with people using the tool. People say, I asked ChatGPT this, it gave me the wrong answer, or I did this. And I think Pascal commented on this earlier.
I don't even think is the wrong outcome.
No.
I just think it's not diversified enough, and it's nature versus nurture.
But this is the thing. The diversification, yes, and the Louvre is not a global platform. This is a fair point. But the diversification isn't on the database. It's on your interpretation.
Yeah,
of the
exactly.
Data.
We need
you
to
have to specify these things. That's how the tool works, right? And that's not to say that there isn't a ton of bias in these things. There are, but that's up to you as the user to determine what the tool does, because if you ask a large database for something without any context, you will always get a result that is not what you're looking for. Context is the thing that these are all missing. And it should be built in, and it should be open source. And I agree with everything you're saying. But I only disagree with, we've given people this ability with no guidance on how to use it. We're like, here's all the data in the world, write a sentence, right? That's not good user instruction. That's a horrible user interface.
Yeah.
I think
I agree with Ayla, by the way.
60 seconds.
One thing, I agree with Ayla. The default setup is supposed to be diverse. The default setup is not supposed to be biased.
All right. So, unfortunately,
And
we're
here
out of
we
time.
are, we're all speaking English.
Thank you all very much. I think so. What we've learned from this is that there is no consensus when it comes to the future. No one can predict the future. But hopefully, this has sparked your imagination, and it will allow you to be prepared for various scenarios when it comes to how AI plays out, what the role of humans could be. And thank you all very much for attending, and thank you all for your amazing insights.